Up next in the broadcast, just after seeing some progress in inter-Korean relations, the two Koreas exchanged fire across the maritime border after a North Korean boat strays across the boundary. Samsung Electronics says its third quarter operating profit is expected to drop about 60% on year due to heavy competition and saturation in the high-end smartphone market. And a Spanish nurse becomes the first person to contract the Ebola virus outside of West Africa in the current outbreak after treating 2 Ebola patients who later passed away. Primetime News begins now. Welcome to the program. You're watching Primetime News live from Seoul. I'm Sean Lim.
And I'm Kang Chery. Thanks for joining us tonight. We begin with a small inter-Korean skirmish at sea. The two Koreas briefly exchanged fire today near the western maritime border.
It was prompted by a North Korean patrol boat crossing south of the de facto maritime border in the West Sea. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff says warning messages were given and shots were fired. The North Korean vessel returned fire but turned back a short time later. Although it's not rare to see this type of incursion by North Korea, the move could be seen as a mixed signal as it comes just a couple of days after 3 top North Korean officials made a surprise visit to the south.
And during that surprise visit to South Korea, North Korea agreed to hold another round of high-level talks with the South. And North Korea watchers say Pyongyang will be asking Seoul to lift sanctions imposed on the regime back in 2010. So what are the prospects of that happening? Our Hwang Sung-hee tells us more.
When officials from the North and South sit down for talks in the coming weeks, the easing of sanctions imposed by Seoul 4 years ago will be a top priority for North Korea. The sanctions, instituted in response to the North's sinking of a South Korean warship, ban nearly all inter-Korean economic activities except those within the Kaesong industrial complex. Seoul says Pyongyang must assume responsibility for its involvement in the 2010 incident.
For the May 24th sanctions to be lifted, our stance is that North Korea must first take responsible steps that can be fully accepted by the South Korean public.
Considering North Korea had been raking in $3 billion annually from cross-border trade before the sanctions, its losses amount to at least $15 billion. In that time, Pyongyang's dependence on China has increased, its trade with Beijing standing at around $6.5 billion last year. Addressing concerns that the sanctions are standing in the way of improving inter-Korean ties, President Park Geun-hye has shown some flexibility. South Korean companies are taking part in a fresh trilateral project with Russia and North Korea, building a railway running from the North Korean port of Najin to the Russian town of Hasan. But before South Korea lifts any sanctions, it will also have to take into consideration the handful of international sanctions that have been slapped on Pyongyang over the years. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics issued its preliminary third quarter earnings report, and it looks like business conditions are getting tougher for the tech giant. Profits are expected to drop by 60% on year as its handphone business gets eaten away on the high end by the new iPhone 6 and on the low end by Chinese handset makers. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Samsung Electronics posted its worst quarterly earnings in 3 years. In a provisional report released ahead of official figures due around the end of the month, the company says its operating profits dropped to $3.8 billion in the third quarter. That's a near 60% drop from the same period last year. Third quarter sales dropped more than 20% from the same period last year to $44 billion, mainly due to lagging sales of its high-end smartphones.
The rise of competitors in China is seen as the main factor behind Samsung's declining global smartphone market share. The popularity of Apple's iPhone 6 and 6 Plus are also believed to have had an impact as consumers held back to wait for the new models, which were released last month.
Eroding profits in its mobile unit has in turn affected other Samsung units that supply things like displays and processor chips. The analyst says the star performer was the chip business, which was expected to account for nearly half the third quarter profit. Due to this, a pickup in the fourth quarter is unlikely as saturation in the high-end smartphone market is further driving down unit prices of Samsung smartphones while increasing the company's marketing expenses. Samsung says it's preparing for new smartphone lineups with innovative designs and new materials. It's also developing mid to low-end devices to compete in the ever-evolving market. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Overall, however, Korea's exports in the information, communications, and technology sector hit an 11-month high in September. The ICT exports grew 9% on year to hit $15.4 billion last month on the back of strong sales of display panels, computer devices, and tablet PCs. In particular, exports of semiconductors hit an all-time high of nearly $6 billion. Korea's handset exports were down 5%, however, with the launch of Apple's latest iPhone 6 models and the continued rise of Chinese manufacturers like Xiaomi. In these Red Ocean economic times, one type of business adapting to tough competition in Korea is convenience stores. With their ubiquitous presence, they're taking advantage of their locations to become more than just places to pick up a quick snack or emergency necessities. Our Kim Min-ji takes us through some of their more unconventional services.
Convenience stores in Korea are pushing to become more convenient than ever, evolving into so-called living stores that cater to the everyday needs of consumers. The number of convenience stores has jumped more than 60% from just 4 years ago. This translates into roughly one convenience store per 2,000 people, and it's growing to become a $12 billion industry this year. But with quantitative growth approaching its peak, convenience stores are now seeking new sources of profit by offering a new range of products and customizing stores to meet the individual needs of customers.
7-Eleven offers diverse products depending on store locations. In this store, we sell flowers and have imported a French underwear brand. We're also planning to offer more products that meet the needs of single-person households.
Non-food products now make up about 17% of 7-Eleven sales, and the plan is to boost that figure to 20% next year. GS25, another popular convenience store, is offering a lineup of tech goods from cell phones and televisions to water purifiers. And some take it to another level by offering space to enjoy a cup of coffee or hold meetings.
I didn't know these rooms existed. I hope to use one in the future with my friends when I do team assignments.
Customers can reserve these rooms at just $1 per hour, along with free Wi-Fi access, printing facilities, and laptop rentals.
We created this space with the purpose of attracting more customers by offering convenience. People visit our store not just to buy food, but to spend time.
By shifting focus from their traditional money makers like instant foods towards new goods and services, convenience stores are striving to be more than just a quick stop shop. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye is seeking to secure a better foothold in West Africa and throughout the continent following a summit with Côte d'Ivoire President Alassane Ouattara in Seoul on Tuesday. Korea signed a MOU with the West African country to bolster bilateral and economic cooperation. Seoul also asked Côte d'Ivoire support for Korean firms to more actively participate in the region's infrastructure as well as construction projects. African diplomacy has been an important part of President Park Geun-hye's foreign policy. The leaders of Uganda and Mozambique were the first two world leaders to visit Seoul after President Park Geun-hye took office last year. This year's Nobel Physics Prize has been awarded to 3 Japanese-born scientists for their invention of blue light-emitting diodes, commonly known as energy-efficient LED lights. Professors Isamu Akasaki and Hiroshi Amano of Japan and Shuji Nakamura of the United States were named winners of the prestigious prize Tuesday in Stockholm, which includes $1.2 million in prize money. The Nobel Prizes in chemistry, literature, Literature and Peace will be announced later this week, while the winner for Economic Scientists will be named on October 13th.
Combine these colors, you get...
The Hong Kong government and pro-democracy protesters have agreed to several rounds of talks to find a way out of this standoff that's gripped the city. And we're going to go in depth on this topic today. And John Carroll from University of Hong Kong is joining us for this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. First of all, how do you forecast the talks between the government and protesters will play out?
Well, this is one of those times when it's good to be a historian and not a political scientist. We study the past. We don't really try to make predictions. My guess, though, is that not a whole lot will come out of this. I'll be happily surprised if it does, but it's hard for me to imagine much coming out of it, partly because what the protesters have been protesting against is the ruling, not so much the ruling, but the issuance recently by Beijing that Hong Kong will not have sort of completely open elections in 2017 for the chief executive, and the Hong Kong government really doesn't have any way to change that.
Right, so it's clear that the protesters don't want to compromise on their universal suffrage, and they also want to get rid of Beijing's heavy hand. But what does the Communist Party ultimately want?
Well, it's hard to say. The Communist Party hasn't really said much. One of the sort of the traps of the basic law, which is Hong Kong's mini constitution, is that it pretty much says Hong Kong will stay about the same as it was in 1997 when Hong Kong went back to Chinese sovereignty. It does talk about eventually getting universal suffrage by universal standards, but one of the points that the Chinese government has made is that universal standards vary, right? Hong Kong people, the protesters, for example, would say, well, if you're going by, North Korean or Iran standards in Iran, well, then of course Hong Kong is getting a degree of universal suffrage. But they'll also point out that what they really want is not that, is a much more, is basically a full universal suffrage, right? So their complaint basically is that they don't want to have to elect somebody who has been approved or screened by the Beijing government.
Then what happened to the two systems, one country agreement? Was it working fine since 1997 until now, or was this eruption in the making for a while?
Well, one country, two systems is in many ways a work in progress, right? As you may know, it was originally designed not even for Hong Kong, but it was designed for Taiwan. Right, the idea being that at some point Taiwan would become part of China again. So, not only is it very much a work in progress, it's overall, I would say it has not really changed dramatically. Again, from the Beijing government's point of view, nobody has ever promised Hong Kong people the kind of universal suffrage that they want. So I think to a certain degree, the Beijing government can say with some validity that not a whole lot has actually changed. Of course, what's happened in Hong Kong is that people have wanted more and more change. But I don't think we can really say that suddenly the one country, two systems model has fallen apart or anything like that.
And there's no clear leader on the part of these protesters. Do you think that could make things complicated for the government?
It definitely could. The funny thing about this whole movement is that the week before last, it was really a student movement. It was led by young people, mostly university and high school students. And at the tail end of their movement, about a week ago, a little longer than a week ago, the Occupy Central sort of people moved in. Let's just call them the grown-ups, even though certainly university students are grown up as well. And then somehow the Occupy Central leaders seem to have some sort of withdrawn. When I went down to Occupy Central last week, and I went almost every night for a few hours, almost everybody there was pretty young. It was not quite clear to me where all the adults have gone. And as you may know, Hong Kong's political system is extremely parcelized, right? You've got all these different Democrats, the pan-Democrats. You've got one main so-called loyalist party, so-called pro-Beijing party. So it's not really, you're right. I think what you're getting at is that the movement right now really needs leadership, and it's hard to tell where that is.
All right, and it's a bit hard to tell where this will all pan out. Thank you so much, though, for your insight. That was John Carroll from the University of Hong Kong.
Thanks.
A nurse in Spain has been confirmed by health officials as the first person to contract the deadly Ebola virus outside of West Africa.
With more, we turn to Paul Yee at the News Center. Paul, the Ebola scare has now hit Europe with the fresh case striking the continent for the first time. What were the circumstances behind this infection?
Well, health authorities in Madrid say they're still investigating exactly how this 45-year-old nurse came down with the disease, despite taking every precaution while working at a hospital. Excuse me. The development has the European Commission demanding answers, and it's also prompted the World Health Organization to raise awareness on the growing health crisis. Our Shin Se-min reports.
A Spanish nurse has become the first person to contract the Ebola virus outside West Africa in the current outbreak. Spain's health minister confirmed Monday that the woman, described as sanitary technician, had treated 2 Ebola patients in Madrid who later died. She has been transferred to a hospital in Madrid for treatment, and 30 healthcare workers who came into contact with her will remain under observation for 3 weeks. In the United States, the Obama administration is working on bolstering its defenses against Ebola.
We're also going to be working on protocols to do additional passenger screening, both at the source and here in the United States. All of these things make me confident that here in the United States, at least, the chances of an outbreak of an epidemic here are extraordinarily low.
6 people have so far been treated for Ebola in the United States. 1 American man developed symptoms a week or so after coming into contact with an infected person in Liberia. The administration says a travel ban from West Africa is not an option at the moment. Looking to raise global awareness, the World Health Organization announced Monday that although Ebola is not an airborne virus like flu, it can be passed through breast milk and urine. The WHO stressed in particular that the virus can persist in semen for at least 70 days. Ebola can also be transmitted through direct contact with the bodily fluids of an infected person, including blood, sweat, and saliva. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And turning to the Middle East, Islamic State militants have broken through into the Syrian border town of Kobani as they continue to clash with Kurdish forces. Fierce fighting in the streets along with heavy civilian casualties were reported on Monday as the Kurdish resistance continues to lose ground. IS is said to have seized control of Kobani's eastern districts and is now spreading into southern areas. The attacks have triggered some 180,000 refugees to flee to neighboring Turkey in fear of mass violence and torture in the wake of the extremist group. Airstrikes by American and Gulf state warplanes failed to halt the advance on Kobani, which was pounded by heavy artillery. IS forces have pushed for control of the town for almost 3 weeks now in a bid to control the northern territory along the Turkish border. And in the United States, the Supreme Court has allowed the expansion of same-sex marriages in America by not ruling on the appeals by 5 states seeking to uphold their bans. The 9 justices refused to review lower court rulings that had struck down gay marriage bans in Wisconsin, Indiana, Oklahoma, Utah, and Virginia. Following the announcement, the Attorney General for the state of Virginia hailed the ruling as a victory for equal rights.
This is the outcome. A new day has dawned, and the rights guaranteed by our Constitution are shining through. All Virginians have the constitutional right to be treated fairly and equally, to have loving, committed relationships recognized and respected, and to enjoy the blessings of married life.
The move is expected to clear the way for gay marriage to be legal in 30 states, which is up from 19 plus the District of Columbia. Meanwhile, challenges are pending in the remaining 20 states. And finally, a team of engineers in Mexico has developed a new high-tech jacket that can track your health and fitness, paving the way for the next generation of smart wearables. Designed for joggers, the jacket called Podium not only measures your heart rate and body temperature, but any kind of movement. In order to collect the data, the smart jacket is packed with sensors and can even be recharged using embedded solar panels. Created at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, the smart jacket also feeds vital signs and performance information to smartphones in real time. But aside from the cutting-edge features, the development team said they focus on merging form with function.
We designed several versions of the jacket until we came up with a design that could cover the electronics throughout the human body. The jacket is made of laser-printed waterproof material. This breathable material allows runners to keep cool.
The first batch of jackets has already been made, and the team plans to start filling orders by early next year. According to market research firm Juniper, the global smart wearables industry is expected to reach $53 billion in terms of revenue by 2019. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome. I'm Stephen Che with Tuesday's top sports headlines. First up, South Korea football. Recently hired manager Uli Stilica and his 23 national team call-ups met for their first training camp early Tuesday. The South Korean national team is embarking on a new journey, said Stilica, and the German coach is at the helm. The new manager said that he'll train the team to play a new and improved brand of football that excites the fans. Meanwhile, South Korea's offensive cornerstone, forward Son Heung-min, had this to say about the first encounter.
It's the first meeting, and I think both the manager and the players have very high expectations. We have 2 matches coming up, and because results are so important, the players have to be prepared.
As in all new beginnings, expectations are sky high, but there's a long road ahead on this journey, all starting with the Paraguay friendly match on Friday. Now to baseball in the KBO. Let's put the spotlight on the Kia Tigers taking on the Nexen Heroes. Kia's Kim Byung-yeon faced off against Nexen's Moon Sung-yeon. Now Nexen gets on the board first with 1 in the first inning and then another in the second inning. Now Kia, they respond with 1 in the third and also 1 in the fourth. Then Lee Bum-ho, he homers in the 5th inning. It's 3-2 Kia. But it swings back to Nexen in the bottom of the frame as Seok Chang and Lee Taek-gun make contact. They add a couple more runs and Nexen goes on to win this one 6-3. And looking at the other games, Hanwha beats Lotte 8-5, SK takes down NC 2-1, and finally LG beats Samsung at home 9-5. And going across the pond and to the MLB postseason, the National League Division Series continue on. The Dodgers' Ryu Hyun-jin returned to the mound after 24 days of rehab, but despite his solid 1-run 6-inning start, Los Angeles fell to St. Louis 3-1, giving him the no decision. Meanwhile, the San Francisco Giants were unable to sweep the Washington Nationals. The Nationals won 4-1. Both Game 4s take place Wednesday morning, Korea time. And moving on, Japanese tennis star Kai Nishikori is having a career year, to say the least. He reached 6th in the world rankings, the highest ever for a man from Asia. He extends his own record set last week for reaching 7th in the world, this time after taking the Japan Open crown for his 2nd win in 2 weeks. He's now won 4 titles this year alone, to add to the 3 he's earned in the last 6 years. And that's all I have for now. Your weather's up next. Have a good night.
Hello everyone, I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather updates. Yet another beautiful autumn day was enjoyed here in Korea under clear skies. Well, these days, the mornings have been starting off chilly in the low teens, but temperatures quickly rise by the afternoon, leading to warm daytime conditions, and it looks like this pattern will continue for a while. On Wednesday evening, we'll be able to check out the first total lunar eclipse in 3 years, starting from 7:24 p.m. We also have a national holiday coming up this Thursday, which is Hangul Proclamation Day, and it looks like Mother Nature will continue to be on our side. On to Wednesday's readings. Seoul hits 24, Daegu and Gwangju 25. On to other regions. Daejeon and Jeju reach 23, Dokdo 20, Mount Kumgang 13. That'll do it for now. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Bo-kyung. And that's Primetime News for this Tuesday. I'm Kang Chery. Thanks for watching.
And I'm Sean Lim. We'll see you soon. Have a great night.